Welcome to episode 14 of Creepify True or False, the original animated web series where I put illustrations to terrifying stories and you guess if they really happened. At the end of each episode, I'll tell you which tales were true and which were false. There's a famous saying in Appalachia: if you heard something in the woods, no you didn't. Over the summer, the owner of the place I stayed at said she was going to sell her property. My friend/roommate and I had to find a new place to live, and quickly. After some freaking out and scurrying to find a better paying job and new residence, I happened upon a nice little house in a new state. Moving was a somewhat crazy process, but I settled on a U-Haul. I ended up having to rent the U-Haul, drive down to the new place, bring the truck back, get my car, and drive my cat children, my friend, and the remainder of our stuff to the new home. First off, driving the truck was a bit of a horror story in itself. I'm used to a smaller subcompact car, and the hills and a massive 10-footer with not so good brakes gave me a pretty good bout of anxiety. When we arrived to unload our stuff, there was a hellacious thunderstorm, so we tried to wait it out in the house, but gave up and just got our stuff inside because the truck was due back that day, and the late fee was insane. We got our stuff out, took a breather, set up the internet at our new home because I needed to work remotely, and then we were on our way back. The drive back was fairly, and thankfully, unremarkable, but I noticed that the sun was setting quickly. I remember estimating we'd get back around 8:30 p.m., past astronomical twilight, when the last bit of light would be swallowed up by the horizon. Now, I should explain the logistics of the U-Haul place because I'm sure some of you won't know what I'm talking about unless you've experienced it for yourselves. There are some facilities that are basically outside storage places. The one I had chosen was in the middle of nowhere. It was off the beaten path, surrounded by trees, with only 2 trucks, including mine, behind some little storage locker type things. There's an app you can get on your phone, and that's how you mark the time of your return, and there are instructions on the app with the process, and a number you can call in case you get tied up, which of course I did. The internet for that particular state I was in was known for being less than stellar. I had to enter the miles I drove, the amount of gas left, which I should say a big thank you to the guy who had the truck before and decided to fill it up with only half a tank. And then you put the key in the back of the truck and lock it with the padlock. The intention was to return, lock the keys back up in the storage compartment, and be done. I got everything accomplished a couple of minutes after the return time, which I got a huge fee for, but I couldn't get the return to be accepted on the app. I called U-Haul to tell them I wasn't able to complete the return, and the guy basically told me to keep trying. I asked if I could complete the return via a phone call, and he said to use the web browser as opposed to the app. Basically, good luck and keep trying. While my friend and I were outside trying to get better reception, I swore I heard something coming from the woods. A faint, faraway sounding, single-word phrase, made ominous by the fact that I couldn't place the source of the sound. Hello. It sounded like someone was trying to disguise his voice an octave up. Truth be told, it sounded like something mimicking how a person should sound. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before. I tried to push the notion out of my mind that I heard what I did. The idea that someone or something was in those woods calling to us covered my being in chills. But my friend looked at me and said, "Did you just hear that?" I can't remember exactly what I said as a response, but it was something to the effect of, "I'm trying to convince myself it didn't just happen." I can't express to you the terror that we both felt, alone in those dark, desolate woods. It was easier to dismiss the noise as a singular, shared delusion, until it happened again, and again. Despite my mounting fear, I continued to attempt to finish the return, but it was to no avail. I hurriedly threw the keys in the back of the truck and locked it. We both hopped back into the cabin and shakily locked the doors. It was probably the single most terrifying event of my life. Visions in my mind came to fruition of a group of people lunging at the truck and pulling us from the cabin to do God knows what. I called customer service for the second time to try to explain our situation. We were essentially stuck in the middle of the woods with no means to escape, and the sounds from outside continued. I talked to customer service for a minute and then was put on hold, and the line disconnected. It was pitch dark outside now, with barely any light but the moon to illuminate the surrounding area. My phone battery was dying. We'd just driven to and from another state, unloaded all of our furniture in a thunderstorm, spent the week packing and cleaning, and we were exhausted. And there was some kind of weird person or people outside of the truck. We had no keys and nowhere to go. All I could think to do was call the company back. This time I was connected to the kindest woman I could imagine. I told her what was happening, now with tears brimming my eyes, and she told me to put my safety first. She was one of those people who had the ability to calm me down merely by speaking with her. I was still freaking out, but I felt vindicated to have somebody like her on the other end of the phone. I honestly wish I could reach out to her and thank her to this day. Long story short, I would leave the U-Haul and deal with the return from home. So after I got off the phone with her, it was time to get an Uber. We booked a ride on the app and we're good to go. When we saw the car was getting close, we made a run for it. The entrance to the storage facility was set back from the road, with no signs or any indication to turn for the Uber driver. Of course, we were terrified to be out of the safety of the truck, but there was no other way. We stood on the side of the road for about 10 to 15 minutes while the Uber driver called us, because he was unable to find our location. But we got picked up and got the hell out of that place. To this day, I wonder if people believe me when I tell this story. I luckily don't have too many horrifying memories during my lifetime, but this one takes the cake for the creepiest. Right before the pandemic hit in February of 2020, I was looking for a new place to live and settled on a little apartment in northern Illinois. I was really hoping for a house, but the area was quiet. There were a lot of things to do and places to eat around the neighborhood, and the landlord seemed really friendly. It was the first time I lived by myself. I'd had roommates in college, one of whom I'd lived with since 2018, but it wasn't working out, so I decided to go it alone. If you know what it's like to have roommates who are often late with the rent, leave the sink full of dishes, and love to play their music past 3 in the morning, well, you know. After I had gotten unpacked and settled, I cooked myself dinner and watched some television. It was a bit strange to be alone for the first time. After getting used to it in school, you expect to have someone randomly walking in at any moment, especially when you live with a social dude who loved bringing friends over. But I knew no one was coming. Mid-bite, I thought I heard someone whispering from behind me. I put my noodles down and stopped chewing, and listened. Nothing. You know the typical deal that you hear stuff when you're alone? Well, that's what I chalked it up to. Of course, nothing was whispering to me. After a few hours of watching Law & Order SVU and nodding in and out of sleep, I took myself to bed. I had just hit the edge of sleep where things were getting fuzzy when I heard it again, that strange whispering sound. A fuzzy, fearful feeling washed over me as I brought my feet over the bed and set them on the carpet. I thought for a moment about all of those characters in horror movies who went to investigate a scary noise. I myself had judged them, but I had to know. If I didn't investigate, how was I going to live in this new place if I never knew what was going on? I padded down the hallway until I made it to an air vent on one of the connecting walls to the adjoining apartment in the living room. I crept along the wall and lowered myself down next to the vent. I swore I heard it again, but it was so quiet I couldn't discern what was being said. My blood was rushing in my ears, and sweat beaded on my forehead. After a moment, I heard the whispering again. I held my breath. "I can see you," it said. I stumbled backwards and ran to my room. A plethora of thoughts ran through my mind. Do I call the police? Will they take me seriously? Should I take the vent off? Stay in a hotel? Am I sleepwalking? I'd taken a great deal of schooling, but nothing in my life prepared me for the instance where I heard somebody whispering to me from behind an air conditioning vent. Apropos of that, the vent was small. How the hell would somebody even fit back there? All of a sudden, I wished I hadn't decided to live alone. Being by myself in an apartment was not where I wanted to be just then. I locked my bedroom door and lay back down. I tried to convince myself it was some weird coincidental thing I'd been experiencing from a lack of sleep and stress. Besides, it's not like I had to live in that apartment for the rest of my life. If it got that bad, I'd move out. I went back to sleep and decided to deal with it all later. I went through life like normal the following day. I did some unpacking and arranging. With the exception of the creepy wall voice thing, it was a really nice apartment. The weather was great, so I opened the window and listened to some music. In the middle of a track changing over, I heard it again. The whispering. I didn't take time to make sense of it. I just kept the music playing and went to my room to watch television on my laptop. Before bed that night, I set my phone outside of the air vent and I let it record with the voice memos app. If I needed to escalate the situation, I wanted proof. I went to sleep that night with music playing and woke up the next day to retrieve my phone. I searched for the recording and there was nothing for a good period of time, just the sound of my music playing from my bedroom. But I saw a peek in the recording and fast forwarded there. There was a man's voice that said, "Look inside." I almost fell over when I heard it. For a moment, I wasn't sure what to look for, but then I eyed the vent. There was a small folded up piece of paper between the slats. I pulled it out and unfolded it. In bold, black, permanent marker were the words, "You shouldn't have done that." I contacted the landlords and informed them that I would be breaking the lease. I now have a roommate, and I don't think I'll ever live by myself again. Now is the time to find out which of our stories really happened. The first story involved a harrowing experience where two men were returning a U-Haul and heard someone or something calling to them from the woods. So what's your take on this story? Did it happen? Yes, it did, and I can personally vouch for it because it's my experience from over the summer. The second story involves someone hearing whispering from a vent in his new apartment. Did this one really happen? Nope, it is made up. Thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of Creepify True or False. If you have a story you'd like to share for a chance to be illustrated and narrated, you can email it to the link in my bio. And as always, have a spooky day.